What's happening, everybody? On today's show, tons of news around the conference with several departures. Liam Coen leaving Kentucky after just a year. Matt Luke leaving Georgia. Kodi Burns leaving the Vols. We'll get you update on some recruiting news as well. And we'll hit on some SEC topics with Braden Gall of Athlon Sports and the Fringe Element podcast. Locked on SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what is happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. Great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Remember, Locked On SEC is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and at lockedonsec.com. Let's jump into it. Plenty to discuss. Let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Takes the handoff. What a catch!
Around the conference.
And we start over in Lexington as Liam Coen is leaving the Kentucky Wildcats after just one season as their offensive coordinator. Albert Breer of the Monday Morning Quarterback reporting that Liam Coen will be the Los Angeles Rams' new offensive coordinator, replacing Kevin O'Connell, who left to be the Minnesota Vikings head coach. In his one season in Lexington, the Wildcats ranked 35th nationally in scoring offense, averaging 32 points per game, 50th in total offense. Those were dramatic improvements from the previous year where Kentucky ranked in the hundreds in both of those categories. He also brought in a couple of transfers that helped along the way. Will Levis at quarterback, Wan'Dale Robinson at wide receiver. Both of them had strong seasons. So we will see who Kentucky replaces Liam Coen with as their offensive coordinator. A lot of jabber out there that probably going to go in a similar rank. Go find somebody, an up-and-coming quarterbacks coach, receivers coach, something like that at the NFL level to come in and bring some NFL concepts to the Kentucky Wildcats. Meanwhile, over at Georgia, they are beginning their spring practices here in just a couple weeks. But before they do that, they will have to fill another role on their staff, according to Anthony Dasher at UGA Sports. Offensive line coach Matt Luke is expected to step down. That news expected to officially be announced at any day now. Matt Luke expected to step down. That's according to multiple sources, an official announcement to come. But Matt Luke spent 2017 through 2019 as the Ole Miss head coach, where he went 15-21. He joined Georgia in 2020 when Sam Pittman left to take over the head coaching job at Arkansas. Did a good job with this group offensive line at Georgia, helping lead them to a national championship win. But several reports out there, Matt Luke wants to spend more time with his family. Of course, we know the COVID stuff took a toll on a lot of people with recruiting and NIL deals and all this other stuff going on. Some guys just stepping away for a little bit. It sounds like Matt Luke will step away from football for some time, so we wish him the best of luck. Meanwhile, over at Tennessee, Kodi Burns, their wide receivers coach, he is leaving Knoxville for a job in the NFL, according to Pete Thamel of ESPN. He will become the wide receivers coach for the New Orleans Saints. Burns was on Auburn's 2010 national championship team. He's coached at Auburn as a co-offensive coordinator, at Arizona State, Samford, as well as Auburn and Arkansas State. He's previously or primarily coached wide receivers and running backs over the years. Now he'll get reunited with a couple of former Vols, particularly Marquez Callaway, former Tennessee Volunteer wide receiver for the Saints. Also have Alvin Kamara back there in the backfield, although he may be facing a couple of game suspension for his offseason stuff. But congrats to Kodi Burns, and Tennessee will look for their next wide receivers coach. Meanwhile, some other news from around the conference. Mike Leach and the Mississippi State Bulldogs, they're going to get an extra home game this year. On Tuesday, the Bulldogs announced they'd completed their non-conference schedule, adding a game against Western Michigan out of the WAC. That game will be played October 7th, 2023. That game will replace a game that was originally supposed to be played at Tulane. So the Bulldogs will now play at Tulane in 2032. Mississippi State's three other non-conference games. Again, this is 2023, not 2022. 2023, their other home game or non-conference games will be against Southern Louisiana, Arizona, Southern Miss, and now Western Michigan, all those being played in Starkville. So a lot of home games for Mississippi State in 2023. So good for them. Meanwhile, over at Mizzou, a veteran defender could miss some time following an arrest by University of Missouri police. Stacey Brown, a safety who appeared 9 games last season, started a game against Georgia. He was arrested early Monday morning on suspicion of possession and delivery of a controlled substance and unlawful possession of a firearm. Brown appeared in 25 games over the past 3 seasons, mostly as a backup safety and on special teams. So we will see what happens with the future of Stacey Brown at Missouri. Meanwhile, over at Vanderbilt, Clark Lee continues to make some changes to his coaching staff. One vacant position was in his secondary, but it looks like he has made a hire there. According to Pete Thamel of ESPN, the Commodores are looking to hire Northern Illinois assistant Dan Jackson to come in and coach their secondary. Jackson was the Huskies cornerbacks coach, defensive pass game coordinator, and co-special teams coach at Northern Illinois. Some other player news: Darryl Porter Jr., a breakout star for West Virginia in their secondary this past year, announced he has entered the transfer portal, and he is down to 4 finalists, one of them being the LSU Tigers. His other 3 schools are Miami, Florida State, and Oregon. So we'll see if Darryl Porter Jr. opts to go play at LSU next year. Speaking of LSU, a couple of their former coordinators have landed their next jobs. On Monday, the Minnesota Vikings announced that former LSU defensive coordinator Durante Jones, he will go back to the Vikings as a DB's coach. He was previously with the Vikings before leaving for LSU. Meanwhile, Ian Rappaport reports that former LSU offensive coordinator Jake Peetz will join Sean McVay's staff with the Los Angeles Rams. Ian Rappaport noted Jake Peetz worked with Sean McVay at Washington back in 2014. In some recruiting news, Jaleel Hurley, who's a cornerback, he is one of 5 five-star players from the state of Alabama for the 2023 class. On Tuesday, he was the first one to announce his decision. The 6'2", 170-pound cornerback out of the state of Alabama is committed to the Crimson Tide of Alabama and Nick Saban. Hurley is the number 22 overall prospect in the 2023 class, number 4 cornerback, according to 24/7 Sports. Alabama now has 2 players in its 2023 class, ranking number 22 in the nation. Meanwhile, Georgia, their 2023 class took a little bit of a hit on Tuesday as 4-star DB Kyan Lee, he took to Twitter to announce he was decommitting from Georgia. He did note that he will still consider Georgia in his process. He is the number 17 cornerback in the 2023 class. In some softball news, the SEC off to a heck of a start so far in their seasons. In the latest Softball America Top 25 poll, the SEC has 9 teams ranked in the top 25. Alabama coming in at number 2. Florida comes in at number 4. Arkansas ranked 14th. Kentucky 16th. Missouri 18th. Tennessee 19th. Georgia 20th. LSU 21 and Auburn 22. Alabama stud pitcher Montana Fouts, she was named the SEC Softball Pitcher of the Week after she went 2-0, 3 appearances last week at the Easton Bama Bash. She allowed just 1 run on 6 hits while striking out 24 batters over 13 innings pitched. At Florida, Kendra Falvey, she was named SEC Freshman of the Week after she hit .550, going 11 for 20 at the plate over her 6 games. So congrats to all of them. And SEC baseball, SEC softball just continue to be so dominant across the conference. All right, that is around the conference. When we return, we're going to catch up with Braden Gall of Athlon Sports and with the Fringe Element podcast. We'll talk some SEC stuff with him, including he is talking about his SEC quarterback rankings, which you may be a little bit surprised where he has some of those guys ranked. That's coming your way next.
Guys, it is that time of year where you've probably given up on your New Year's resolutions and you're starting to eat garbage, trash, and you're not sticking to those resolutions. Let me give you a solution that can help you eat right. That is our friends over at Built Bar. If you haven't tried their puffs yet, you're missing out. They are the best tasting Built Bars out there. The puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar. They are a treat, and they are covered in 100% real chocolate. Low in calorie, high in protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They're better A typical candy bar could be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Built Bars, 130 calories, 4 grams sugar, 4 grams net carbs, 17 grams of protein packed in there. Go check them out at built.com. You can scroll down and see all the different macro charts they have on all the different calories and everything else. Go to built.com and make sure you use our promo code LOCK15. That'll get you 15% off your order. Use our promo code LOCK15. Get 15% off over at built.com. Roll along here, Locked On SEC, and look, there's so many different topics going on around the SEC right now with the spring games coming up, and look, all the stuff that's settled down at Auburn. We still got some coaching changes happening across the SEC, and of course, a lot of expectations for what should be a really good crop of quarterbacks for the SEC next year. And so join us now. I thought nobody better than to get in here. Our guy, Braden Gall, host on SiriusXM, ESPN Radio, Athlon Sports. The man does it all, and he joins us now. Braden, what's going on, man?
What's going on? I'm doing well. Can I also throw in another show to promote and maybe create some beef, like interpod beef here on the show?
Absolutely.
Fringe Element Podcast, everywhere you get your podcasts. SEC football only. I think those of you listening to this show would enjoy it. I think there's plenty of space for all of us. And again, if I can create some beef with you and we can kind of, maybe go back and forth, get our audiences yelling at each other. I don't know what better way to celebrate the SEC football in the offseason.
See, here's why I don't have a problem promoting other podcasts, Braden, because we're daily. I mean, other people do, once a week, twice a week, every couple of days. We're 5 days a week, and we're like 20, 30 minutes, and you're done. Some other people are doing the 45 minutes. So, I mean, there's a space for everything, right?
Yes, we are some of the lazy people that only do it once a week. But we do give you about an hour and a half. We've got great guests, all the great stuff. So again, there's a million different ways to consume SEC football. Right here's a great one. Fringe Element is another one. Rate, review, subscribe.
All right, perfect. We'll remind you guys about that later in the show. I want to just dive right into it, Braden, because I got tons of questions just about what's going on across the SEC right now. What do you make of the offseason Brian Harsin has had so far at Auburn? And are we delaying the inevitable? Like a year from now, are we talking about Auburn in the search for a head coach once again?
Yeah, I don't know how we're not. Now, what's weird about all of this is I think Brian Harsin's a pretty decent football coach. I think fit is very overrated. If Brian Kelly wins at LSU, no one's going to care that he's never been like to the bayou or ridden on a fan boat through the swamps. Like no one's going to care as long as you win. So I think fit's overrated, but I do think you have to sort of adapt to your environment a little bit. And Brian Harsin, from all accounts, just sort of has, sort of thumbed his nose at a lot of that. Some of that's Auburn's fault because the boosters they tend to derail things quickly. Listen, the buyout goes down after December 31st, unless he goes on a 9 or 10 win season, which they will not be projected to do. They will be projected probably to be last in the SEC West when we get to media days or with our magazine Athlon Sports. And then, of course, it just looks a lot better to fire someone after 2 years than after one. You can get your ducks in a row, get all the boosters lined up on the back end. Again, I think you can do some things in the next 9 or 10 months that would be responsible, adult-like things that would allow Auburn to go through this process again. Who's in charge of it? How, again, is it work? Is it feasible? Can you do it? I don't know. I mean, the team itself is losing a lot of pieces. They got quarterback questions, the defensive lines, the entire thing is in the portal. So there's going to be a lot there. I think Harsin's a pretty good coach. He may just not be suited for sort of the SEC and what it requires to win in this conference.
Yeah, I look at it almost as, he went with the mold. It's like, let's get some coordinators in here with some SEC experience. Let's get Derek Mason. Let's get Mike Bobo. And now both those guys are gone. Now he's got guys that were with him in Schmedding and Keesaw. And it's like, all right, now it really is the Brian Harsin show. Like, let's see what you can do. But man, it's a different animal going from Boise to Auburn in the heart of the SEC, right?
Well, 100%. And what's funny about those two coordinators is I think like Mason is a smart coordinator hire. He has experience. He's going to run your defense. That's not Harsin's baby. hiring Mike Bobo, who he does have a relationship with from his time at Colorado State. So they knew each other. That's why it happened. But really, that felt from the beginning, from the second they announced that felt like the boosters are trying to help you pick out your coaching staff. And that will never work. It never has worked at Auburn or anywhere else. You have to let the coach do their job. And again, Harsin and Bobo don't really do anything similar from an offensive scheme standpoint. And so Harsin, again, receivers not getting lined up and the guy gets fired after 4 games. Like, it was just kind of obvious that wasn't going to work. All the other stuff is sort of is very unpredictable. Like all the, whether it's COVID, whether it's vaccines, whether it's, sort of, we're going to do it my way or the highway. The player stuff is hard to really know because half the players like him and half the players don't. It's hard to gauge on what that is. I mean, some guys need an authority figure to be their football coach. Some guys need a best friend. And that's like parenting. So that one's a little trickier to sort of pinpoint, but he definitely didn't endear himself and go out of his way to do a lot of that. You can't be missing like the Bo Jackson Golf Charity Classic and not showing up to, Georgia high school Hall of Fame dinners. Like you can't outsource that stuff to your assistants. You have to do that yourself. So this long answer here, but it feels like this is a foregone conclusion. I would say January 1st, 2023.
We'll set that as the over-under. And we'll see if he'll let guys start taking the elevator again instead of telling them they got to take the stairs. Switching gears, your thoughts on Jimbo Fisher, on what he did on signing day, signing the greatest recruiting class ever assembled. And then what did you make of his comments where he kind of went after people saying, this wasn't because of NIL deals? You're crazy.
I don't know what the cussing barrier is here on this podcast, but I'll try to keep it clean because I do enjoy how he ended his rant where he's like, I'll tell you that, this is like Saban, to be honest. Every time Saban speaks, Saban is not talking to us. He's not talking to his fans even. He is talking to his players currently or future players as recruits. That's everything Saban is saying. You have to view through that lens. Jimbo Fisher is cut largely from the same cloth and learned a lot of that from Saban. And in my opinion, when I heard that rant, like through the coach speak translator, I'm hearing like I need to lower expectations so not every single 5-star, 4-star recruit that we recruit thinks there's like some $30 million kitty that we just get to give to people. Although, as it turns out, it does feel like almost every school in the SEC is going to have about a $25 or $30 million collective serving up dollars for recruits. So, ironically, long story in The Athletic about that exact thing just a couple of weeks later. But he's lowering expectations. He didn't go as far as Hugh Freeze when Hugh Freeze basically tweeted to the NCAA like, "Hey, come find me. If you can find anything, come get me." Turns out they found a lot. He didn't go that far, but he is sort of saying like, y'all are complaining about all this stuff, and I know you're all doing it too. And they are. Everyone's doing it. So he's right that there's not that we're not handing out checks for 7 figures to single players in 1 year. But as we've learned, these collectives that are being set up by every major university in college football, you're gonna sort of try to sign kids into those contracts over a 4-year period. 25 kids in a class over a 4-year period, broken up into four separate sort of years. Like, it's not out of the question to see $15 or $20 million go to a recruiting class over 4 years. And again, if you break it all down, like that's the cost of getting a top 10 class these days or top 15 class. So I don't think he's really wrong in any of that. If only his offense could run as rapidly as his mouth, that would be great because the dude can say syllables faster than anybody I've ever heard in my life. And his offense is one of the slowest in all of college football. And I think it's the last thing they need to do to get over the hump to compete with Bama and Georgia because they got the dudes. The last thing they need to do is sort of just kind of nudge that offense forward from an evolution standpoint, run a little bit more tempo. If that's Haynes King, then great. Use him on the edge the way they used Kellen Mond. So there's a lot to like about A&M. I think they're one of the very few teams that can win the whole thing next year. And we've seen Fisher do it with a freshman quarterback surrounded by a bunch of 4- and 5-star recruits. He won the national title that exact same way at Florida State. And I think he's very, very confident. He doesn't go on that rant if he's not very, very confident in where his program is and what his team looks like. And I agree with him. I think they're one of the 3 or 4 best teams in America coming into the season next year.
You mentioned quarterback. I want to touch on that in just a second. We're talking with Braden Gall. More right after this.
Thank you guys again for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. A little bit more with Braden Gall here in just a second. But first, need to remind you, football is over. Basketball is in full steam in both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, right to Olympics, whatever it is. Head on over to their website today. You can do so on your mobile device or your laptop. Learn all about the trends and action going on there at BetOnline.net. And of course, BetOnline, it is where the game starts.
Continue our conversation with Braden Gall. Of course, you know him for years, SiriusXM, ESPN Radio, Athlon Sports, and of course the new podcast, which is
Fringe Element. Yes, it's a weird name. I know that. Fringe Element, everywhere you get your podcast. SEC football. We got in the offseason, we got comedians, we got musicians, we got chefs on there. So it's not just hardcore football, which it is, but there's also a lot of other stuff in there as well. So Fringe Element podcast, SEC football every single week. Not every single day, but every single week.
Yeah, for every day you got us here at Locked On SEC. We appreciate you guys making us your first listen every day. I saw you put out your SEC quarterback rankings for 2022. Now, this is a bold thing to do in February, Braden, because so much can change. I mean, the transfer portal, half these names might be at a different school by the fall. But I think some of us were surprised you had KJ Jefferson up there at number 2, right behind Bryce Young at number 1. I guess explain your rationale on why you have KJ Jefferson number 2 at Arkansas.
I honestly, I have no problem with KJ Jefferson, Hendon Hooker, and Will Rogers. I think those 3 guys are 2 through 4 in any order you want to put them. I think Bryce Young is obviously number 1, but I'm okay with any of the other 3 guys. I think KJ Jefferson has a little bit more upside than the other guys. That's why I put him at number 2. I think, Hendon Hooker, none of these teams would trade their guy because Will Rogers is a great fit for Mike Leach's offense. Hendon Hooker's a really excellent fit, just wildly efficient last year for Josh Heupel in his first season. And I think pretty underrated, actually, as far as national efficiency metrics, 3rd in the nation in quarterback rating, that kind of stuff. Yards per attempt, completion percentage off the charts. I think Jefferson brings a little something extra that Cam Newton sort of kind of ability, that big body, that big frame, his ability to sort of take over a game single-handedly. I got no problem with 2 through 4 being all basically even. Will Rogers should be the all-time single-season SEC passing leader. But Bryce Young played an extra game last year, and Joe Burrow is alive. So other than those 2 guys, Will Rogers had the greatest passing season in history of the league last year. And I think that goes, again, that kind of flies under the radar. So all 3 of those guys are great. I lean towards Jefferson because of his size, physicality, the dual threat ability. I know Hooker can run too. But I got no complaints. If you want to yell at me and tell me I'm an idiot for having Jefferson at 2, I'm totally fine with that.
No, I think it's an interesting argument because I feel like he is a guy who we've seen flashes at times, but man, other times I look back and see he led him to a win, but at the end of the day, he had like 150 passing yards and like 80 rushing, and it's like, I guess he's just doing whatever it takes. But I'd love to see him take that next step as a passer where he's consistently throwing for 220, 240, and I know wide receiver, outside of Traylon Burks, they haven't had much to work with, and now you'll have Hazelwood from Oklahoma, but I'd love to see him take that next step. But give me a name towards the bottom of your list that you wouldn't be surprised if that guy ended up in the top 3 at the end of the year.
Well, I also took a lot of heat for having Anthony Richardson at number 5. That's a total upside play on my part. Like, I just fell in love watching the kid play last year. Over 8 yards per play. So a lot of people probably have him down in that 8, 9, 10 range. That's the guy I would point to because I've got him up in that top 5. Frankly, to be honest with you, if you look at the top 11, let's say the top 11, I'll take Vanderbilt, Auburn, and Missouri out of the equation because they're all battles and we don't know who the starter is going to be. But I think they're clearly the 3 worst. If you wanted to argue 5 through 11, and put anybody in any one of those slots, I would be, again, totally fine with it. Stetson Bennett won the national championship, and you could argue he's not even a top 10 quarterback in the SEC.
Right.
You could also argue he's the second best quarterback in the SEC, and I'd be fine with that. Will Levis, Jackson Dart, Spencer Rattler, Haynes King, Miles Brennan. Again, maybe King's going to have a battle. It's all about talent and upside, and every one of those guys has a ton of ability. Will Levis is probably the one guy who's not, an elite passer, but he does things another way. And 9 rushing touchdowns, willing his team to victory last year. So Rattler's the wild card, to be honest with you.
Yep.
I had him very low on my list, and it's not really a function of him as much as it is a function of his situation. Why is it that Spencer Rattler failed at Oklahoma with a better coaching staff and offensive scheme, a better supporting cast against a lesser schedule? Why is all of a sudden Spencer Rattler, who threw 5 touchdowns against FBS competition last year at Oklahoma for Lincoln Riley and got benched, why all of a sudden is he gonna flip a switch and take a South Carolina team with less supporting talent, a coaching staff that's less experienced against a tougher schedule? Why is that all of a sudden going to be the thing that sort of the light bulb clicks on and all of a sudden he's better? Like, he wasn't that. The worst 2 Oklahoma teams we've seen in I don't know how long were both quarterbacked by Spencer Rattler until they made the switch. So I think there's a lot of I need to see it before I believe it kind of deal. And Jackson Dart's kind of similar. I just think he lands in a far better situation. He lands with Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. And if Spencer Rattler was with Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, I'd have him higher on the list. I think that's more about trusting Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss in that situation. So either Dart or Rattler could skyrocket. Haynes King could skyrocket up that list with his athleticism. Miles Brennan's a really good player. It's a function of how deep this league is. I think it's, go back to 2013. I think this is the best crop of quarterbacks you've seen in this league since 2013, which would have been, Johnny Manziel, AJ McCarron, Aaron Murray, James Franklin, Zach Mettenberger, Connor Shaw, Dak Prescott. Just 2013 was the last year I can remember being this good, and I think this is a really, really good crop of guys.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say on it is it was surprising. I mean, and look, there's nothing wrong with your list. I mean, you could literally throw a lot of these names in a hat and shake it up and pull them out. But I just wonder with Miles Brennan, I don't know what the Brian Kelly offense is going to look like with Mike Denbrock coming over from Cincinnati. Obviously, they had great success last year with Desmond Ridder. But I just wonder, those few sample sizes we saw with Miles Brennan, I mean, the kid was throwing 300, 400 yards a game, and now he's got Keyshawn Boutte back at wide receiver. That's a guy I could see throwing for a ton of yards. Maybe they don't win 8, 9, 10 games, but I could see him throwing for a ton of yards this year.
Yeah, totally. And could you argue he belongs 5th or 6th on this list by the end of the year? Absolutely. Again, you said brave thing to do in February. Look, it was a Friday. I was choosing violence in my life by doing this in every conference. We choose violence on Fridays in the off season. And somebody has to rank 6th and somebody has to rank 7 and 8 and 10. You got to put them somewhere. They can't all be 4th, right? And that's how I feel. You could put all these guys at kind of 5th, and I would be like, okay, I got no problem with Spencer Rattler being top 5 or Miles Brennan being top 5 or Haynes King being top 5. I think there's just so much talent at this position. And there's even more talent coming in. You got the Grenier at Auburn, you got Wiggle, you got Nussmeier, you got just keep going down the list. Everybody that's on a lacrosse team is playing for Georgia. They're all off the Bachelor. It's
right.
It's Stetson and Gunner Brock. Brock and Stetson and Gunner. It's all off a Netflix reality TV show at Georgia. So we kid.
He is Braden Gall. Go follow him on Twitter at Braden Gall and go yell at him and tell him why his list is terrible and sucks and all that kind of stuff. And while you're doing it, go check out his show, The Fringe Element. Of course, it's up at YouTube and where you find your podcasts. Braden, it's been a lot of fun, man. Let's do this again real soon.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. No problem.
All right, thanks so much. It's Braden Gall there. You can follow him on Twitter at Braden Gall, of course, of the Fringe Element, and tons of different places you can find him. That is just about going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Again, my thanks again to Braden Gall for joining us, and we'll be back tomorrow here on the show where we'll be joined by a member of the South Carolina Gamecocks. You don't want to miss that, as he is getting ready to take his talents to the next level. DB, we'll just say that. Thank you guys again for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Now go make your second listen. Check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. Ryan Tracy and Eric Crocker bringing you the NFL Draft insight, analysis that you need. I am Chris Gordy. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow right here on Locked On SEC.